What's up, NAIA Nation? It's your boy Manny here, and welcome back to the Hoop Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 61. It's opening day in the national tournament. Round of applause. We made it, y'all. We've made it. It has been a heck of a week. Obviously, I told y'all there would be a lot of content throughout this week, and I hope you guys did enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. It was a lot of fun just deep diving into all these teams and seeing, matchups and how things are going to play out, or how I think things could play out, trying to pick some upsets. I told myself I was not going to go majority chalk. I wanted to try and get as many ups as possible. Got some 15s over 2s, got some 14s over 3s, some other matchups that are, could be a lot more likely to be upsets than some of the other ones. But overall, I think it was a really fun week, so I really hope you guys did enjoy it as well. This episode, talk about the number one seeds, talking about some Cinderella teams. Pretty much just went one per quad. Asterisks on one of those quads, and I'll get to that when we get to that part of the episode. But talk about the number one seeds going in order from hardest region or hardest quad, I feel like, to the most favored for the number ones. And then we'll talk about, like I said, opening round, some bangers, some sleeper games, keep an eye on. Again, one per quad. And then obviously the Cinderella teams as well. Speaking of Cinderellas, and I'll say that. We'll go right into the number one seeds. I know I haven't given them a lot of love throughout the past episodes from a preview standpoint. Because, again, like I said, and I've been saying in every single episode, there is not a 1-16 matchup that I'm necessarily concerned with in these opening rounds. Not anything against the 16 seeds, but I do feel like the number one seeds are the better teams in those matchups. With that being said, there is an interesting development here. And I haven't posted my Final Four yet that I feel like, and I mean, obviously, if you guys have been watching the episodes, you can kind of tell who my Final Four are. But I haven't posted it yet for a reason. And I'm actually, we'll post it now. We're gonna put it up now on the screen, just so you guys can see who I do believe will be the Final Four in the national tournament, so you can see it all put together. So these are my Final Four that I think will be in the running for the national tournament. Obviously, the Final Four will start on March 23rd. Dordt, Freed-Hardeman, Dakota Weston, and Evangel. Those are the four teams that I do believe will make a run at that red banner when it's all said and done. Obviously, two of those number one seeds are in the Final Four in my book. Two of them are not, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. And that's kind of where we're going to start when I talk about these number one seeds. So I did it in order of, again, hardest region that I felt, hardest quad that I felt, to the most favored for the number ones. And the hardest quad I feel is for sure the Liston quad. I believe that quad is legit. I think there are 10 teams in that quad that have a legitimate opportunity to try and upset Marian and in their route to the Final Four. It is the deepest quad. I'm talking about. I mean, even the second round, you're going to get either Columbia or Carroll. Both teams very, 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 very good teams. Columbia, I think, has the top-end talent to really give Marian a little bit of run for their money. Again, defensively, Marian's not going to be an issue. None of these number one seeds are bad. None of these number one seeds are not deserving number one seeds. I just feel like from a standpoint of not necessarily weaknesses, but just the grind of having to win and you having that target on your back, how does that play out? And I do believe it's hardest for Marian because, again, the depth of these teams I'm about to name is legit. Columbia, you've got at least 4 to 5 players on that Columbia team that are going to be able to go off on any given night, sometimes all together. Then you've also got Carroll, who's got very, very good defensive abilities to maybe give, Marian a little bit of struggles. In the Sweet 16, you're looking at either Evangel, who I do believe is going to upset Marian. I think that is the one team that I'm like, hey, that's the biggest threat to me in Marian's run. It's Evangel. Then you got William Carey, who is no slouch as well. That could be another team that you play in the Sweet 16. Then you get to the other side of the bracket. Pretty much everybody on this side of the bracket to me is a completely realistic opportunity to upset Marian, except maybe like 2 teams, And even still, those 2 teams, I've seen crazier things happen. UT Southern, Spring Arbor, Indiana Tech, LSU Shreveport, Kansasville, Benedictine, I think are all legitimate cases to upset Marian or at least give them a run for their money. I really do believe that. All these teams just mentioned, deep from an offensive standpoint, all these teams can play defense. That's going to be the biggest thing, obviously, moving throughout the rest of this episode, because, again, defensively, you have to be able to guard these number one teams. There's no way you're going to be able to out-offense Marian, Freed-Hardeman, Dordt, or Bethel. None of those teams are going to be able to out-offense them. You got to be able to get some stops in a row, and then we can worry about the offense side of the ball. Even the teams I didn't mention on that side of the bracket with a Bryan or even a Northwestern, they're in. So you cannot, and if you're playing either one of those teams, that means that they've gone on a great, crazy winning streak. They've gone on a great run here and have built some momentum. So any one of those teams pretty much in the bracket, I really do believe has a chance of upsetting Marian. That is why I think that Marian is in the toughest quad with the deepest, because it's the deepest quad. Some of these other quads, they're good, but I got to a point where I was like, all right, now I'm pushing it. And I feel like I'm giving too many teams too much credit. Anybody can win, anybody can lose, but there are some of these other teams in the other quads where I'm like, I just don't see it. I don't see it. Even if these number one teams have an off night, I still don't believe that certain teams are going to be able to upset these number one seeds. Going over now to the second hardest quad that I feel, it's Freed-Hardeman. I do have Freed-Hardeman coming out of the of their quad, of the Naismith quad, and winning the whole thing. I do have the Freed-Hardeman Lions winning the entire national tournament. The biggest thing with this one is, does redemption fuel some upsets? Like I talked about at the beginning on Monday, this is the quad where I feel like a lot of the seeds, higher specifically, but a lot of these seeds have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because of the way their conference tournament went or how their conference play went. You know what I mean? You're looking at some games where I'm like, a Langston, for example, in the next round, if you play them, or Bethel, for example, two teams on either side of the coin. Langston, great momentum going into the SAC tournament, gets upset by the number 8 seed in the tournament in the first round, and then now you're watching from home even though you feel like you should have been at least in the semifinals or the championship game. For Bethel of Indiana, you're on the opposite side. You're talking about a team that really came alive and slowly started coming alive throughout the second half of the year, and Marian Freed-Hardeman hasn't really dealt with too many teams like that. But for Bethel's case, they've turned a corner. I was talking about them being, hey, they're a legitimate team here, rising in the stocks in terms of their conference, and especially the toughest conference this year in NAIA women's basketball in the Crossroads. They were rising. They even got Spring Arbor in the first round. Like this is a legitimate team here that thrives in these moments where you're getting overlooked or where you're not giving them the respect that they deserve. Bethel is going to be a real player here. That's the second round. Then you go to the Sweet 16. I'm looking at two teams, really, Loyola or Georgetown. Those are the only two teams that I feel like could really give a run for Freed-Hardeman. More so leaning towards Loyola. Now, Georgetown, I give them the nod because they've seen Freed-Hardeman 3 times already this season, I believe. So they know what to do. They know what they want to run. In Loyola's case, it's brand new. That's why I give them the situation because, hey, you've never seen them. They've never seen you. That element of surprise is a real thing in these tournaments. But those are the two teams that I see in the Sweet 16 that would give a good contest for Freed-Hardeman. On the other side of the bracket, Dakota State, legitimately one of the best teams in the country, could have been a number 1 seed, probably not number 1 overall, but could have been a number 1 seed if their tournament kind of went their way instead of Montana Tech's. Bethel of Kansas, they've got the talent, and that's the biggest thing for me. They've got the talent, y'all. And another team that, just like Dakota State actually, who did not win their conference tournament, in Bethel's case, they didn't even get to the finals. At least Dakota State got to the finals and lost the number 2 seed. Bethel lost in the first round of the 7th seed Tabor Blue Jays. So they've got a little bit of chip on their shoulder as well. And we know when you're given a second chance of life for your season, especially at the national tournament, you want to take full advantage of it as best you can. Then you got Concordia, a team that's got good depth. Obviously, was battle testing the GPAC this year. And then Rio Grande, who I don't know if you can talk about a team that's on a 20-game winning streak as being, under the radar or underrated, but it feels like they have been. We're talking about a dynasty here in the River States, 5 conference tournament championships. You don't just do that on accident. You know what I mean? So it's very impressive what the other side of the bracket is going to hold. All of these teams that I just mentioned, 3 out of those 4 teams that I talked about that would play Freed-Hardeman in the Elite 8 are teams that feel like their conference tournament didn't go the way they wanted it to. Again, Dakota State lost the championship game. Bethel lost in the first round. Concordia, I believe, lost either in the first round or the second round. So you're talking about teams that, hey, we feel like we should have done better, and now we have a chance to really show that in the national tournament. Rio Grande is the only team that's won it from the other side of the bracket, that's probably, I don't know if that's better or worse, because now you're talking about a team, like I said, who's been on a run for the past 5 years in the River States. They are the bar in that conference. So, and obviously, Coach Smalley has been, he has so much experience on his side. That is also going to come into play here. So those different things are why I look at Freed-Hardeman and say, there's 8 teams that I believe could give them an interesting battle going throughout their quad and going throughout their quest to try and get to the Final 4. Now we go over to the Duer quadrant with Bethel. Similar feel, just like talking about redemption in Freed-Hardeman's case, Bethel is momentum, period, good or bad. You know what I mean? Most of the momentum in the Freed-Hardeman quad is kind of bad, trying to avenge something that happened in their conference tournament. But for Bethel, you've got a different situation here. Some of the teams, I see 7 teams for Bethel that I think could be an interesting player here. I don't really see, in the first or second round, I don't really see them having any trouble with Oregon Tech or Huntington. I don't see that. I believe either one of those teams, if you force me to pick one, I would maybe say Oregon Tech might be the one that I would be a little more concerned about. But I don't really see them struggling with that. Now, in the Sweet 16, you've got LC State, you've got Montana Tech, and or Nelson. Those are your three options. I am most concerned with Montana Tech because they are running a nice momentum here, winning the Frontier, beating Dakota State 2 times this season. That's a very important thing to note. For Nelson, they didn't win the tournament, but they were one shot away. They were from getting to the championship game, I believe it was. And they even have the ability of element of surprise. I believe it's their first time in the program's history, if I remember correctly what I read in their article, that they made it to the national tournament. So that first time through, you never know. You never know what could happen. So they've got that going for them. And LC State's been here before. They obviously made it to the conference championship in the Cascade, did not get what they wanted, but a team that kind of been up and down at the beginning of the year, but seems to have righted the ship going into the tournament, which is what you always want to have. You want to be playing your best basketball at the right time, and they definitely are doing that. The other side of the bracket, Lindsey Wilson, obviously a familiar face for Bethel, who, has had Bethel's number a few times this year. Southeastern, a team that I don't know if they can make a deep run all the way to that point, but I definitely want to give them their flowers for what they could have, especially led by Maya Herman and Grace Fields. Dakota Weston is my biggest contender here. They're the ones that I think could knock off and do knock off Bethel in this situation. And then Eastern Oregon, another team where, co-regular season champions with Corbin, a team that did not go the way they wanted to go out in the Cascade tournament. So I think they've got a little bit of chip on their shoulder as well, and they have a very good, talented group that has bought into the system and has gone through some adversity this year, but they're here, and they're a 7 seed. They're a legitimate case here to try and make a run at that Final Four. Last team. The Dordt Defenders, I believe, do have the smoothest route to the national tournament's Final Four. I believe that. I believe they have the best case. They got also 7 teams, but I don't see a second round. I do believe interesting one. Southern Oregon, Rocky Mountain. Either one of those teams pose a matchup problem. Southern Oregon a little smaller, a little quicker, but they could also be affected on the inside. Rocky Mountain a little taller, but the speed of Dordt is going to be, I believe, this issue there. But I still think those two teams have an interesting, from a style standpoint, have an interesting argument to be had. Mid-American Nazarene and Alleviate Nazarene are the 2 teams in the Sweet 16 that I'm keeping an eye on. Mid-American Nazarene, I believe they already played Dordt earlier this year. I know they played a few teams in the GPAC. Remember, I'll pull it up here just so I can check myself. But they're an interesting one because if they did play them, that's something to note. If you ever play against a team that's already number 1 seed, you have that on your resume in terms of, hey, we know what went well, we know what didn't go well, we know what we've improved on since the last time we played them. That's a very, very big advantage for these lower seeded teams. Looking through, I believe they're actually their only loss this season. Yes, Mid-American, not their only loss, but they did play Dordt back in December of 19, and they lost 64-48, did the Pioneers. Not a bad game. It was a 16-point loss to the number 2 team in the country at the time, to the 2-time defending national champion. So that is not a bad case. And you also were coming off of your second loss of the entire season when you lost to Grandview by 3, I believe, in overtime, the literally almost a week before. So that there's definitely a little bit of a layover there. I do believe Mid-American Nazarene, though, has a really good case of playing and maybe handling business against this Dordt team. The other side of it, I know it's a little bit of a wild pick talking about Alleviate Nazarene, but the scoring is just what I'm going to look at there. You know what I mean? They just put up so many points, y'all. And in a tournament like this where it's a one-off where – and yes, you obviously could get cold before then, and that's definitely a possibility. But I'm more talking about, what if it's the other side of the coin? What if they get hot? What if they start riding off a crazy – I mean, you're talking about if they run into Dordt, that means that Alleviate Nazarene would have beat Mid-American Christian in the first round, beat either Mid-American Nazarene or St. Mary in the second round. So you're talking about only 2 games. 2 games. You know what I mean? Like, I could see them really finding some rhythm. The cool-off period doesn't start until maybe the Elite 8, or the Big 8, the Final 4. That's when I'm looking at that stuff kind of happening. But before then, I could see the Tigers getting a little hot, catching some heat early on, especially from that 3-point line, the way they play, the pace that they play at. I think it'll be a very, very interesting matchup between them and Dordt. The other side of the bracket is only 2 teams I'm most concerned about. It's Hastings, having that Dordt experienced multiple times this year, and St. Francis of Indiana. Those two are the teams that I think from an offensive standpoint, I'm looking at Hastings they've been on a tear offensively, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in a few moments here. And St. Francis, I feel like, has been the second best team in the best conference all year in the Crossroads. I've said that before, and I'm going to keep saying that. They were right there with Marian. They were one game away from, winning the conference, and in both cases, obviously they didn't do that, but that has to say something. And so I'm very curious to see if St. Francis can find some, clinks in the Dordt defenders' armor once they finally would meet, and that would be in the Elite Eight to try and get to that Final Four site. So a lot of different elements there, but I do believe Dordt is the favorites out of all the number one seeds to get to the Final Four again. And at that point, now it's two games for you to cement a dynasty in the NAIA basketball world. On the women's side of, this is the bar. The defenders are the bar. Dordt is the bar. You want to be the best team in the world. You got to be able to play them, and you got to be able to hang with them. But that's going to do it for like that part of the episode where we're looking at the Final Fours, and I'll recap here exactly what my Final Four looks like. Again, Dordt, I believe they come out of it. They'll play Freed-Hardeman. I do have Freed-Hardeman winning that game. I believe Dakota Wesleyan would be the team that would upset Bethel in the Big 8. And then I've got Evangel upsetting Marian in the Sweet 16, and then eventually running that momentum all the way through. I would have Dakota Wesleyan beating Evangel in the Final Four. And between Dakota Wesleyan and Freed-Hardeman, I've got Freed-Hardeman, the Lions of Freed-Hardeman, winning the national tournament, and Coach Abby Stoltz's second year, and what a year she's had already. Now heading over to the Cinderella side of things. For Cinderella teams that I feel like could have Big 8 potential. That is what I'm looking at. Can they get to the Big 8? This is the breakdown that I was able to find in terms of percentage chances to make a run. Obviously, you've got your number 1s, 2s, 3s, even your 4s. They're all favorites. That Cinderella spot, we're looking 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's the ones that I'm looking at the most. 9's a long shot. You see 2 to 4% chance, but, it's also a matter of who is the 9th seed and whatnot. Same thing for 10, 11, and 12s and beyond. My lowest Cinderella team is going to be an 11 seed, and I'll show you why when I say the team. You guys won't be shocked about it. But heading right into it, I picked one team from each bracket, from each quad, that I felt could be the ones to do it. We ended with the Naismith. We'll start with the Naismith right here. The Naismith quad, 9-seeded Bethel. Bethel of Kansas is the one that Bethel of Indiana is the one that I'm looking at. Now, Bethel of Kansas does also have a serious case here. And to be honest with you, I was going back and forth between Bethel of Indiana and Bethel of Kansas. And to be honest, I think I'm going to go Bethel of Kansas. Yeah. I'm going to go Bethel of Kansas instead of Bethel of Indiana. I just feel like Indiana, they have a situation where to get to the Elite 8, to the Big 8, you gotta beat Freed-Hardeman in the second round. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I know I just said they have a chance, but I wouldn't bank on that chance happening. So I'm going to go actually with Bethel of Kansas, the 11th seed, another 11 seed. So I do have two 11 seeds that I feel could make a nice little Cinderella run here in their situation, right? So if we're looking at Bethel's run, in the first round, Bethel of Kansas would have Concordia. Very tough matchup, but I do believe they have the talent to be able to give Concordia a little bit of trouble. If they were to win that game, they would have the winner of Dakota State Grandview. That would be a huge test. I think it would be Dakota State. I would love to see a Kendall Locke, Tabor Teal matchup. Oh my God, that would be such a great contest just from those two alone. Oof, I would love to see that. If they were to win that one, then they would have any of Rio Grande, Rochester Christian, Cumberlands of Kentucky, and Indiana Wesleyan, before they would eventually run into the Big 8, and whatever team on the other side of the bracket would get that honor. It's not the easiest run, but I think the team that I'd be most concerned about if I was Bethel would be Dakota State. Because the rest of the teams, I think there's a one or two situations where, hey, we actually can do this better. We can give them a little bit of an issue there. For Rio Grande would be the team on the other side of their side of the bracket, just because the way they play is just so impressive. Looking at Bethel, the biggest reason I believe in them is, and I kind of went through. I picked one team that I believe like just talent wise, and that's Bethel, just talent. I love their talent. I picked the team that conference momentum going on their way. I also picked a team with elite guard play, and I picked a team with a redemption kind of, trying to avenge something from their conference or from their season. So Kendall Locke, that's Batwoman. That's your number one option, but you've got a great Robin and Alfred in Madison McKenzie and Carly Locke. It's just the top end talent of Bethel is so legit. They had a strength of schedule of 87, so they played some very good competition. Their quad breakdown, quad 1, they went 2-4. Quad 2, they were 7-4. Quads 3 and 4, they were combined 11-1. That one loss being in quad 3, obviously. And key tournament wins. How many wins did you have against teams that are in the tournament? They beat Friend, and they're the only team in the KCAC to beat Evangel. So that's got to account for something. It's got to count for something. And I saw it coming too. I saw the momentum coming. My only fear is that has Bethel peaked, but I don't think they have. So I'm going to go Bethel for my Cinderella team in the Naismith quad. Now heading over to the Cramer quad. Another 11 seed. I realize now, y'all, I may like 11 seeds because I got another 11 seed coming up after this. So I actually had 3 11 seeds, but you'll see what I'm talking about the next 11 seed. It ain't really an 11 seed, but it is an 11 seed. For my 11th seed in the Cramer quadrant, I'm going with Hastings. They just have a great offensive run. They're that team that I think looking to maybe avenge some stuff from their conference tournament, avenge some things from their conference play as a whole. I'm sure there's some games that they feel like they should have had. Just their stretch. Remember I said last month they could have been arguably the best offensive team in the country by how many points they were putting up. They were battling with some of the top teams in the GPAC. So I think that they have a really good timing and peak right now from an offensive standpoint to be able to make a run. For them, first round rematch against Friends, I do have Hastings coming in with that one in a tight one. Then they would play the winner of Corbin and Texas A&M San Antonio. Either one of those teams really would be a shocker if Hastings were able to upset them. And then if they get all the way to the Sweet 16, they would play either St. Francis, Brescia, College of Idaho, Briarcliff. All teams, if they've seen Briarcliff before, I think they match up very well with College of Idaho and Brescia. And St. Francis, I think Hastings actually has a little bit more of a physicality to them than St. Francis does, so it gives them a little bit of an edge there. And so then if you were to get to, obviously, the Elite Eight, it would be the other side of the bracket with everybody else. I think Hastings got a really good chance here to make a run at it. I think the bracket broke really solid for them. So I'm excited to see what they're able to do in this run. For them, their strength of schedule 76, so better than Bethel's. Their quad breakdown 7-2 in quad 1, 9-1 in quad 2, and then a perfect 10-0 in quads 3 and 4 combined. Tournament wins. They beat Dakota Wesleyan. They beat Northwestern 3 times. They already saw Briarcliff, obviously, in the season, and multiple times at that. And they beat Concordia in the season as well. So a lot of good wins under their belt for the Hastings Broncos. I think they've got a good chance at making a run at it in the Cinderella department. Heading over to the Liston quad. This is where I kind of cheated. I'm not going to lie with you. I kind of cheated. Another 11 seed, but I also went the 6 seed. So the 6 seed Spring Arbor Cougars and the 11 seed Indiana Tech Warriors. The reason I went with both is basically I'm saying whoever wins that matchup is my Cinderella team for the Liston quad because they're playing in that first round matchup. They're playing each other. So I was like, you know what? Shout out to the committee because they gave me a great easy out. I'm still picking one team, but it's the team that wins this game. For Spring Arbor, they've been at a great defense all year. They're third in the country in defensive efficiency, which basically measures how many points are you allowing per 100 possessions. And so for per 100 possessions, they are allowing 71.5 points per possession, points per 100 possessions. And that's very elite. Again, that's third in the country, right? Then you add in the net rating, which is basically how many points are you winning every 100 possessions. They are winning every 100 possessions. They're winning an average of 24 points, 24.3 points. That's elite. That's number 19 in the country. Now, again, that shows that the offense is really the issue for Spring Arbor. If they're able to get that in order, they're able to get some more continuity from that side of the ball. They're an elite team on both sides of the ball, and that's what you want to be if you're talking about a Cinderella team making a run at it. Again, a 6 seed. Their strength of schedule, 33. So, again, crossroads teams, understandably so. Their quad breakdown 6-7 in quad 1, 4-0, and then a perfect in the next 3 quads, a perfect 15. Yes, 15-0. 15-0. So their only losses came against quad 1 teams. That's what you talk about when you say handling business. So when you play against some of these teams in the tournament that you should handle business against, they are really good at doing that. Their tournament wins include Rochester Christian. They beat Huntington twice, Indiana Wesleyan twice, Bethel of Indiana, and Taylor twice. So they haven't beat the top teams yet, but they competed very well against those top teams. Like I said, there is something to be said for you being able to handle business against the teams that you're supposed to beat. That sometimes, to me, has always been a bigger measuring stick of elite teams that have championship aspirations. You can't be a championship level team. You can't be a Cinderella type team if you can't handle the games you're supposed to handle. And I mean handle 20, 25-point wins. Like, that's what I'm looking at here, and the numbers do back that up for Spring Arbor. For Indiana Tech, they're my elite guard play team. Between Taylor Covington and Ryan Moore, I think they might have the best backcourt, dare I say, in the quad. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's up there. It's up there for sure. Talking about low turnover rate per game for each of those individuals. We're talking about 31 points combined for them, 8 combined assists per game, and they're only averaging about 4 turnovers per game. So as a duo, this backcourt has a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which every coach will tell you is elite. And to have it together, it makes it even more impressive. And that's why I really don't know who's going to win this game. But obviously I did have my pick, so you guys can go and check that one. They definitely have the lowest strength of schedule. They're at 176. Talks a little bit more about the WAC than necessarily about the team. Their quad breakdowns: 1-4 in quad 1, 8-0 in quad 2, 6-1 in quad 3, 10-0 in quad 4. Their tournament wins include Indiana Wesleyan and Rochester Christian twice. Again, don't let the strength of schedule fool you. They have played against some tough teams. They have lost those games. You know, they lost to Taylor earlier, about midway in the wintertime. They played Huntington. I can't remember if they won that game. I think they lost that game actually. But they've played these teams. They have played them. Remember, I'm only talking about wins, but they have played a lot of teams that made the national tournament. So they are able to be battle tested from that standpoint. Now heading up to the Duer quadrant, my highest seed, the 5th seed, just outside the contender list. I went with Montana Tech. Montana Tech. They're my conference momentum team. You win the Frontier. You're on a 9-game winning streak. You beat Dakota State twice in that winning streak. You got a lot going for you right now. So I do believe that Montana Tech has that. They had it at the beginning of the year, and they've proven that they could be able to bottle it up, take the good, clean up the bad, and keep it rolling. You know, every time you hear teams, you know, the teams that peak in November and in December, you know, there were some teams that did do that and fell off, and there are some teams that did that, were able to stay in the tournament, but also did fall off. Montana Tech is not one of those teams. Montana Tech is one of those teams that, hey, we were elite, number 1 in the Frontier for a couple weeks, you know, perfect in the Frontier for a couple weeks, and then we were still able to elevate our level of play, elevate our game, elevate whatever we needed to elevate to stay at that level. They were the 1 or 2 seed the entire year in the Frontier and gave Dakota State a real run for their money, hence them being the conference tournament champions. So you got to give Montana Tech a lot of credit there. Their strength of schedule is 85. Again, the Frontier did have a really good year in terms of women's basketball this year. 5-3 in quad 1, 8-0 in quad 2, 5-1 in quad 3, and 6-0 in quad 4. Tournament wins include Southern Oregon, College of Idaho, Rocky Mountain, Carroll, and Dakota State twice, like I mentioned. So they have a lot of teams under their belts that they've been able to hold in that win column. Very impressive for the Montana Tech team, and that's why I do believe they have the conference momentum on their side and the continued success and continued consistency of winning at a very elite level. So that's why I'm going to go with Montana Tech. So to recap, my Cinderella teams per quad: Dordt, just mentioned the Montana Tech. Then we're going to go over to Spring Arbor and Indiana Tech in Liston. Cramer is going to be Hastings, and the Naismith is going to be Bethel of Kansas. Those are my Cinderella teams per quad. We're going to wrap it up here for the first round games. Bangers, game that you guys want to tune into for today, if you can. Number 1, Naismith, Cumberland of Kentucky versus Indiana Wesleyan. Blue Bloods, still. You know, obviously both teams, both programs, historical in terms of not just women's basketball, but NAIA in general. Like, they are the bar in a lot of these cases. Definitely took a step back in both of these seasons, but they're still here. They're still here. They're still a national tournament team, so I'm excited to see what they're going to be able to do from that championship experience that they've had. Obviously, Indiana Wesleyan last year, the runners-up in the national tournament game, Cumberland of Kentucky, their first season post-Monday Sisters, and they are still back where they're meant to be. For the Cramer, I'm looking at College of Idaho and Briar Cliff. I think it's kind of poetic that these two teams are playing each other because they've been the last ones in terms of talking about these two conferences. You know, in the GPAC, it's Dordt, Dakota West, and Concordia. Even Hastings, I feel like. Briar Cliff felt like the last team that I felt to mention, or that I've kind of heard a lot of people talk about. For College of Idaho, same thing. Here at Corbin, Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, Oregon Tech, Lewis and Clark State. College of Idaho is always the last team to be mentioned, right? And that's something against these two teams. It obviously talks about the level of play in their respective conferences, but now you've got to play against each other and show that just how good of a team you are. So I think that's going to be a really, really good first-round matchup. And then talking about my Cinderella team in the Duer quadrant, I think their first round matchup is going to be a great one. Montana Tech versus Nelson. Nelson coming off of a very interesting run in the SAC. I remember a time in the fall when they were the only team, they were the highest ranked team. They were the number 1 seed in the SAC, and they were the only unranked team in the top 4. They were over USAO, who was, I think, receiving votes, Langston, who was, I think, receiving votes or ranked in the top 25. They were over MACU, who was receiving votes as well. So they were over all 3 of those teams as the number 1 seed. So this Nelson team's got something up their sleeve. So first round, cannot overlook them at all if you are the Montana Tech team. And then in the Liston quad, LSU, Shreveport, and Benedictine. I think the 7-10 matchup is going to be an interesting one. I think that could be a possible upset alert for sure, but I do think it's going to be a lot of fun watching those 2 teams lock horns and play in the Liston quad for that first round matchup. And again, I talked about them being possible Cinderella teams or teams that could really make a little bit of a run here. They are in that short list for sure. Keep an eye on the Pilots and the Ravens. We're going back through now. We're going to go first round sleepers. Games that I feel like, hey, keep an eye on this game because it could be a banger. We'll go in the backwards order. So we'll stay in the Liston quad. William Carey, Shawnee State. Obviously, I'm going William Carey in that game, but Shawnee State, I've seen some Shawnee State games this year, y'all, and they got some dogs over there. And they love being the underdog. So keep an eye on that 12 seed line. They could be someone that makes some noise here now. Do I have them making a deep run? Maybe not, but they could get this first one. I could see them getting this first one. In the Duer quadrant, I'm going Lewis and Clark State versus Hope International. I think the GSAC champs got something up their sleeves, y'all. I think the Royals from Hope International, obviously the only GSAC team, and I think they want to put on for their conference. Let them know that we should have gotten more. I think obviously the other team that we were looking at was probably going to be the Masters. Even Arizona Christian, obviously a team that fought Hope International to the last possession in the championship game of their conference tournament. Can't overlook the Hope International Royals. I think they've got a good case here, especially if they're able to catch Lewis and Clark State kind of on their back foot early on in this game. Cramer, my upset game. St. Francis in Indiana versus Brescia. I got Brescia now. Y'all saw, if y'all watched that video, the Tuesday episode this week, y'all saw live right here. I flipped it. I had St. Francis in Indiana going into the episode. I had my notes ready. But talking through it, kind of feeling some things out and just gut feeling, I said, you know what? Give me Brescia. Give me the 15 seed over the 2 seed. I think this game is going to be a really good game because from a physicality and a matchup standpoint, I think Brescia does really good at rebounding the ball and controlling the offensive and defensive glass. St. Francis has not really been that good at it this season. It's cost them some games. So keep an eye on this one for sleeper game of the day for sure. Last one, Naismith quad. I'm going Loyola versus Milligan. The AAC champions in both regular season and tournament department versus the team that feels like they should have been that as well in the Southern States. Number 1 seed in the Southern States, Loyola Wolfpack. I do think Loyola's got the edge from a talent standpoint, especially the top 3, the big 3 that I've talked about all year in the Wolfpack that have just been dominant, like the definition of dominant for those 3 ladies. They're going to have the edge for me. But Milligan's got some dogs on there too. And Milligan's thing is they shoot the ball at a very well clip to where they could get hot, not necessarily for the whole game, but just in a stretch. They could run off 9 to 12-0 run, 9-12 to like 3 or 4 run, and now, hey, whoa, what just happened? I think the Buffs have that potential. So keep an eye on that game for sure to be kind of a upset or a nail biter down the stretch. Now maybe Loyola still pulls out, but they're going to get a little scared for the Buffs if they don't give them a little bit of respect early on in that game. But that's going to kind of do it for this episode. Definitely a lot shorter of an episode compared to the ones earlier this week. Wasn't trying to keep you guys here too long. I know a lot of these games might be even starting early, if I remember correctly, from the schedule. So definitely just want to give you guys kind of a quick hit. And to be honest with y'all, being transparent, I kind of wanted to feel, pretty good, and being able to upload literally every single day this week to get you guys ready for the opening rounds. I think it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Definitely a little bit of a tiring endeavor, and we'll definitely be back to our 2 episodes per week next week. Still haven't decided if the schedule's going to change. For now, it'll stay Monday, Friday, but I'll let you guys know because obviously the schedule for the next few rounds will change as well. So keep an eye on that as well. But I do appreciate everybody who's tuned in. The viewership count on the YouTube account has been very, very impressive. I really do appreciate almost every episode for the past few days, getting over 50, 60 views. Some of them even touching the hundreds even before then as well. So I really do appreciate you guys for all the support. I hope you enjoyed all the content so far. I hope you guys were not too tired of seeing my face or hearing my voice, but I do appreciate it. Make sure y'all tune in. It's opening day, y'all. It's opening day in the national tournament. I cannot be more excited. I'm going to be locked in so many different games. I'm trying to find as many screens as I can and watch as many games as possible. So make sure you guys tune into those games, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.